In a world saturated with AI tools, platforms, and promises of automation, there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what separates professionals who thrive from those who struggle. Most people are asking the wrong question. They want to know which AI tool to use, which platform is best, which subscription gives them an edge. But the real question, the one that determines whether you'll still be valuable 5 years from now, is completely different. It's not about the tools, it's about how you think. This video explores a perspective that contradicts most of the advice you'll find online. While everyone else is racing to learn the latest AI platform, we're going to talk about something that doesn't change: the mental models that make you irreplaceable, regardless of which technology dominates tomorrow. Over the next several chapters, we'll build a framework for working with AI that actually strengthens your professional judgment instead of weakening it. If you find this perspective valuable as we go through it, hitting the like button helps this video reach other professionals who are thinking about AI in a more strategic way. Now, let's begin with why the tools themselves matter far less than you've been told. Open any business publication, scroll through LinkedIn, or attend any professional conference, and you'll encounter the same pattern. Everyone is talking about tools. ChatGPT versus Claude, Midjourney versus DALL-E. Which platform integrates with Slack? Which one has the best API? Which subscription tier gives you priority access? The conversation is entirely focused on technology, on the instruments themselves, rather than on the people using them. This is a fundamental category error, and it's causing professionals across industries to invest their energy in exactly the wrong place. Here's what actually happens in technology markets. Tools change constantly. Platforms rise and fall. Companies get acquired. Products get discontinued. New competitors emerge with better features or lower prices. 5 years ago, the AI tools people were excited about barely exist anymore. 5 years from now, the tools we're using today will likely be replaced by something we haven't heard of yet. This is the nature of technology markets. They're characterized by rapid change, disruption, and obsolescence. But here's what doesn't change: the cognitive frameworks that allow you to use tools effectively. The ability to define what problem you're actually trying to solve. The capacity to evaluate whether a solution is good or merely convenient. The judgment to know when automation helps and when it harms. The discipline to verify results instead of accepting them blindly. These capabilities, these ways of thinking, are stable across time and across technologies. When you invest in learning a specific AI tool, you're investing in something with a short shelf life. When you invest in understanding how to think clearly about problems, how to frame questions effectively, how to evaluate outputs critically, you're investing in something that compounds in value regardless of which tools exist. Consider what happened with previous waves of technological change. When spreadsheet software became ubiquitous, some professionals learned keyboard shortcuts and became very fast at Excel. Others learned how to model business problems, how to structure financial analysis, how to think about scenarios and sensitivities. Decades later, the keyboard shortcuts have changed. The specific functions have evolved. But the professionals who learned how to think clearly about quantitative problems, they're still valuable. Many of them aren't even using Excel anymore. They've moved to different tools entirely. But the thinking transferred perfectly. The same pattern happened with design software, with data analysis tools, with project management platforms. The specific technical skills have a half-life measured in years. The cognitive skills, the ability to define scope, to recognize edge cases, to think through second-order effects, those have no expiration date. This principle applies with even greater force to AI tools because AI capabilities are advancing so rapidly. The AI platform you're learning today will likely be obsolete or fundamentally different within 18 months. But your ability to frame a problem clearly, to specify what success looks like, to identify what assumptions you're making, that ability will be exactly as valuable in 5 years as it is today. Probably more valuable, because as AI tools become more powerful, the consequences of using them poorly become more severe. Here's the practical implication. Professionals who remain valuable aren't those who know the most tools. They're the ones who understand how to approach problems systematically. They know how to break down ambiguous requests into clear objectives. They recognize what information is missing before they start. They can articulate constraints, identify trade-offs, and specify what good looks like in concrete terms. These capabilities make you effective with any tool, and they make you valuable even when the tools change completely. There's another dimension to this that's easy to miss. When you focus on tools, you're essentially becoming dependent on whoever builds those tools. You're letting technology companies define your capabilities. You're outsourcing your professional judgment to product teams who have their own incentives and limitations. But when you focus on thinking, on your own cognitive frameworks, you're building something that belongs to you. Something portable, something that makes you valuable to any organization in any industry, regardless of which vendors they use. This doesn't mean tools don't matter at all. Of course they matter. A professional with strong thinking and access to powerful tools is more capable than the same professional with strong thinking and weak tools. But the hierarchy is clear. Thinking is the foundation. Tools are the amplifier. If you get the hierarchy backwards, if you try to compensate for weak thinking with powerful tools, you just make mistakes faster and at greater scale. The professionals who understand this distinction are the ones who remain employable, promotable, and valuable as AI capabilities increase. They're not threatened by new tools because their value doesn't come from mastery of specific platforms. Their value comes from judgment, from problem-solving ability, from the capacity to define what should be done before worrying about how to do it. This is why the rest of this video focuses on mental models rather than technical instructions. We're not going to teach you how to use any specific AI platform. We're going to explore how to think about problems in ways that make you effective with all of them, and effective in whatever comes next. Here's a pattern you can observe in almost any workplace where AI tools are available. Someone encounters a task, immediately opens an AI interface, types something vague, gets a mediocre result, then either accepts it or tries again with minor variations. The entire interaction takes 3 minutes. The result is usually shallow, somewhat relevant, but not actually useful for the real problem. Now watch what a professional does. They encounter the same task and spend 15 minutes before touching any AI tool. They're not procrastinating, they're thinking. Specifically, they're defining the problem. This distinction between jumping to execution versus investing in definition separates effective AI use from theatrical AI use. It's the difference between looking like you're being productive and actually being productive. When professionals define a problem before using AI, they're answering several questions that most people skip entirely. What is the actual goal here? Not the superficial task, but the underlying objective. What does success look like in concrete, measurable terms? What constraints exist? Time, budget, format, audience, compatibility with other systems. What assumptions am I making that might be wrong? What information do I have, and what information do I need? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're intensely practical. They determine whether the AI output will be useful or wasteful. Consider a common scenario. Someone needs to write a project proposal. The amateur approach is to open an AI tool and type, "Write a project proposal for implementing a new customer database system." The AI produces several paragraphs that sound plausible but are completely generic. Because the prompt was vague, the output is vague. The person now has to either accept something mediocre or spend time editing something that was flawed from the start. The professional approach looks different. Before opening any AI tool, the professional asks, "What decision is this proposal supporting? Who will read it, and what do they care about? What alternatives exist, and why is this the recommended approach? What's the budget range that's realistic? What timeline is acceptable? What risks matter most to stakeholders? What does approval look like? A signature? A budget allocation? A board vote?" Now, when the professional uses AI, the prompt is specific. Write a project proposal recommending a cloud-based customer database system for a retail company with 200 employees. The audience is a CFO concerned about total cost of ownership and an operations director concerned about migration from legacy systems. Budget range is $50,000 to $100,000. Timeline is 6-month implementation. Key risks to address are data migration accuracy and staff training requirements. The proposal should lead to budget approval in the Q2 planning cycle. The difference in output quality is dramatic, not because the AI is different, but because the input was clear. The professional did the thinking that the AI cannot do. They defined what problem they were actually solving. This principle scales across every type of AI interaction. Whether you're analyzing data, generating code, drafting communications, researching topics, or designing systems, the quality of your output is determined primarily by the clarity of your problem definition. AI amplifies clarity. It also amplifies confusion. Whichever you bring to it, you'll get more of. Professionals understand something that's easy to miss. The hard part of most work isn't execution. It's figuring out what to execute. It's moving from "we need a proposal" to "we need a document that convinces a cost-conscious CFO and a risk-averse operations director that this specific database system is worth the investment," with particular attention to migration costs and training requirements. Formatted for a 15-minute read and delivered by next Tuesday. Once you have that level of clarity, producing the actual document is straightforward, with or without AI. This is why professionals often spend more time before using AI, not less. They're not slow, they're precise. They know that 15 minutes of clear thinking saves 2 hours of iterating on unclear outputs. They know that defining success criteria before starting makes it obvious when you're done. They know that identifying constraints up front prevents wasted work on solutions that were never viable. There's another advantage to this approach that's less obvious. It builds better professional judgment. When you force yourself to articulate exactly what you're trying to achieve, you get better at recognizing weak problem definitions. You start noticing when stakeholders give you vague requests. You ask clarifying questions earlier. You catch missing information before it becomes a bottleneck. These are the skills that make you valuable. The ability to bring clarity to ambiguity. If you're finding this approach to using AI helpful, this emphasis on problem definition before tool use, subscribing to the channel means you'll catch future guides that build on these frameworks. We focus on the thinking that makes you effective across tools, not tutorials that become outdated in 6 months. The practical habit here is simple. Before opening an AI tool, spend time answering 3 questions. 1. What does success look like in specific, measurable terms? 2. What constraints or requirements must the solution satisfy? 3. What information do I already have, and what information do I need? If you can't answer these questions clearly, you're not ready to use AI effectively. And if you can answer them clearly, the AI interaction becomes straightforward. This doesn't mean every use of AI requires 15 minutes of preparation. Simple tasks with clear goals can move quickly. But for any work that matters, anything where the output will be used by others, where mistakes have consequences, where quality affects reputation, investing in clear problem definition is the highest leverage activity available. It's what separates professionals who get value from AI from people who just generate plausible-sounding text that doesn't actually solve anything. There's a seductive vision of AI that's actively harmful to professional development. It's the idea that AI can think for you, that you can offload cognitive work entirely and just review the output. This vision is being sold aggressively because it's appealing. Who wouldn't want to work less and accomplish more? But the professionals who treat AI this way are systematically weakening their own judgment, and they often don't realize it until the damage is done. The alternative, the approach that actually works, is to use AI as a cognitive amplifier rather than a cognitive replacement. This means using AI to think better, not to think less. Here's what that distinction looks like in practice. When someone uses AI to replace thinking, they approach it like this. I need to make a decision about whether to expand into a new market. AI, tell me what to do. Then they take whatever the AI produces and treat it as the answer. They've outsourced the decision entirely. They're no longer thinking through the problem themselves. They're accepting someone else's framework, or more precisely, they're accepting a statistical pattern derived from internet text that may or may not be relevant to their specific situation. When someone uses AI to amplify thinking, the interaction is completely different. I'm considering expanding into a new market. Here's what I know about our capabilities. Here's what I know about the market. Here's what I'm uncertain about. Help me think through the risks I might be missing. What factors should I consider that I haven't mentioned? What assumptions am I making that might be wrong? What would someone arguing against this expansion say? Notice the difference. In the first case, the person is asking AI to make the decision. In the second case, they're using AI to stress test their own thinking. They're still doing the cognitive work. They're still responsible for the decision, but they're using AI to explore perspectives they might not have considered, to challenge their assumptions, to make their own thinking more rigorous. This approach has several advantages that compound over time. First, it builds judgment instead of eroding it. Every time you think through a problem yourself, even with AI assistance, you're strengthening your ability to analyze similar problems in the future. You're building mental models. You're developing intuition. When you outsource the thinking entirely, you're preventing that development. You're making yourself weaker, not stronger. Second, it keeps you accountable. If you ask AI to make a decision and it goes wrong, you have no idea why. You can't learn from it because you weren't part of the reasoning process. But if you use AI to explore options and then make the decision yourself, you understand the logic. You can trace where things went right or wrong. You can improve your process. Third, it allows you to maintain context that AI doesn't have. Every organization has specific history, culture, constraints, and relationships that affect what's actually feasible. When you outsource decisions to AI, you lose all that context. But when you use AI to amplify your thinking, you can integrate AI-generated perspectives with your specific knowledge of the situation. You get the benefits of expanded perspective without losing the essential context that makes solutions actually workable. Professionals who use AI effectively treat it as a thinking partner, not a thinking substitute. They ask it to generate alternatives so they can compare options. They ask it to argue against their preferred solution to expose weaknesses. They ask it to identify assumptions they're making unconsciously. They ask it to explain concepts they don't fully understand so they can understand them better, not so they can avoid understanding them. Here's a concrete example. A professional needs to decide whether to automate part of a workflow. Instead of asking AI, "Should I automate this workflow?" they might ask, "I'm considering automating this workflow that currently takes 3 hours per week. The automation would cost $5,000 to implement and require ongoing maintenance. What factors should I consider beyond the obvious time savings? What risks exist with automation in workflows like this? What questions should I ask the team members currently doing this work manually?" The AI response might raise issues the professional hadn't considered. What happens when exceptions occur that don't fit the automated workflow? How will institutional knowledge be preserved if the manual process disappears? What's the real cost of maintaining the automation over several years? What dependency does this create on the automation vendor? None of these questions provide a decision. They provide thinking tools. The professional still has to weigh the factors, apply their knowledge of the specific situation, and make a judgment. But their judgment is now better informed. They're thinking more comprehensively because AI helped them identify blind spots. This is very different from asking AI to make the decision, and the difference matters enormously over time. Professionals who use AI to amplify their thinking get smarter. Their judgment improves. They become better at recognizing edge cases, identifying assumptions, and thinking through consequences. Professionals who use AI to replace their thinking get weaker. They lose the ability to reason independently. They become dependent on tools that may or may not be available, may or may not be reliable, and definitely don't understand their specific context. There's also a question of professional responsibility here. When you're hired as a professional, whether you're an employee, a consultant, or an executive, you're being paid for your judgment. You're being trusted to make sound decisions based on incomplete information, competing priorities, and specific context. If you outsource that judgment to AI, you're not fulfilling your professional responsibility. You're pretending to provide judgment while actually just prompting a tool and hoping the output is good. Smart organizations are starting to recognize this distinction. They don't want employees who are good at prompting AI to generate answers. They want employees who are good at thinking, who use AI to think even better. The first type of employee is easily replaced by better AI tools, by cheaper labor markets, by anyone who can write a decent prompt. The second type of employee becomes more valuable as AI capabilities increase, because their judgment and context remain irreplaceable. The practical discipline here is to never ask AI to make a decision for you. Instead, ask AI to help you make better decisions. Ask for alternatives you haven't considered. Ask for arguments against your intuition. Ask for explanations that deepen your understanding. Ask for factors you might have missed. But always keep the actual decision-making authority and the cognitive work that goes with it in your own hands. This takes more effort in the short term. It's easier to just ask AI what to do. But in the long term, it's the only approach that builds professional capability instead of eroding it. And in a world where AI capabilities are increasing rapidly, your professional capability, your judgment, your context, your ability to think clearly about complex problems, is the only sustainable source of value you have. One of the most dangerous myths about AI is that you can treat its output like expert advice. That if the AI says something confidently, it's probably true. That if the output looks professional, it's probably accurate. Professionals who believe this are setting themselves up for serious failures, and in some cases, career-ending mistakes. The reality is simpler and starker. AI output is always provisional. It always requires verification, and the responsibility for that verification never transfers to the tool. If you use AI output and it's wrong, it's your failure, not the AI's failure. This might seem harsh, but it's just an acknowledgement of how professional responsibility works. You're accountable for your work product. You can't deflect blame to your tools. This creates an interesting challenge. AI tools are useful precisely because they can generate output quickly on topics where you might not have deep expertise. But that same quality, generating output on topics where you're not expert, is exactly what makes verification difficult. How do you verify something when you don't already know the answer? Professionals solve this through a combination of strategies. The first is to understand where AI is reliable and where it's not. AI tends to be relatively reliable at tasks involving pattern recognition, formatting, summarization, and generation of content that follows established templates or conventions. It's notably unreliable at tasks involving factual accuracy on specific details, numerical calculations, recent events, niche or specialized knowledge, and anything requiring real-world verification. This means you can trust AI more when asking it to reformat a document, draft an email following standard business conventions, or explain a well-established concept. You should trust it much less when it provides statistics, references specific studies, performs mathematical operations, or makes claims about recent events. The second strategy is to design your verification process based on the risk of the task. For low-stakes work, an internal email, a draft outline, a brainstorming list, light verification might be appropriate. Scan for obvious errors. Check that the output matches what you asked for, and move on. For high-stakes work, a document going to clients, a financial analysis, a legal filing, content that will be published, verification needs to be rigorous. This means checking sources, recalculating numbers, confirming factual claims, and applying your own expertise to evaluate whether the output makes sense. The third strategy is to treat verification as a professional skill, not a chore. Good verification isn't about reading the output carefully. It's about knowing what types of errors to look for and how to spot them. Professionals develop verification heuristics. Does this number seem plausible given what I know about scale? Does this recommendation account for the constraints I specified? Is this explanation consistent with my understanding of the underlying mechanism? Are these sources real, and do they actually say what's claimed? These questions aren't about reading carefully. They're about thinking critically. They require subject matter knowledge, domain expertise, and contextual awareness. Exactly the things that AI doesn't have and can't replicate. Here's a concrete example. An AI tool generates a financial analysis recommending a significant capital investment. The analysis includes projected return on investment, payback period, and risk assessment. A naive user reads the analysis, sees that it looks professional and comprehensive, and forwards it to decision makers. A professional approaches it differently. The professional checks whether the assumptions are realistic. Is the projected revenue growth consistent with market conditions? Is the cost estimate complete? Does it include all the hidden costs that always emerge in these projects? Are the risks identified the actual risks or just generic risks that could apply to any project? Does the recommended hurdle rate match what the organization actually uses? Are there alternatives that should have been considered but weren't? Most importantly, the professional recognizes what the analysis can't tell them. AI doesn't know whether the team has capacity to execute this project alongside existing commitments. It doesn't know the political dynamics that might support or undermine the initiative. It doesn't know what other priorities this project would compete with for resources. These factors often matter more than the financial projections, but AI can't access them. The professional either fills in these gaps themselves or explicitly flags them as limitations of the analysis. They don't present AI-generated analysis as if it were complete. They present it as what it is, a starting point that requires integration with context, judgment, and information that AI doesn't have access to. This brings us to the question of responsibility. When you use AI to produce work output, you are fully responsible for that output. This isn't a legal technicality, it's a practical reality. If the output contains errors, those errors are attributed to you. If the output causes problems, you're accountable for those problems. The fact that AI generated the content is irrelevant to everyone affected by it. This means you can't use AI as a shield. You can't say, "The AI told me this was correct," and expect that to be an acceptable excuse. You're a professional. You're expected to verify your work. The tools you use to produce that work are your choice and your responsibility. Smart professionals understand this and adjust their workflows accordingly. They don't use AI for tasks where they can't verify the output. They don't present AI-generated content as if they had produced it entirely themselves. They're transparent about using AI when appropriate, but they're also clear that they've verified and validated the output. They build verification steps into their process rather than treating verification as optional. There's a related point about trust that's worth emphasizing. You should never trust AI completely, but you also shouldn't distrust it completely. The right stance is calibrated skepticism, trust that varies based on the task, the stakes, and your ability to verify. For straightforward tasks, where errors are obvious and consequences are minimal, you can trust AI output relatively heavily. For complex tasks, where errors are subtle and consequences are significant, your trust should be much lower. This isn't about whether AI is good or bad. It's about matching your trust to the risk profile of what you're doing. Professionals also understand that trust is built through experience. As you work with AI tools over time, you learn where they tend to fail. You develop intuition about what to double-check. You recognize patterns in the types of errors that occur. This experiential learning is valuable. It makes you more efficient at verification without making you less rigorous. The practical discipline here is simple. Assume AI output is wrong until you've verified it. The verification might be quick and light for low-stakes work. It might be thorough and time-consuming for high-stakes work, but it's never optional. If you can't verify the output, don't use it. If you don't have time to verify the output, don't generate it in the first place. This might sound like it diminishes the value of AI tools. If you have to verify everything, what's the benefit of using AI at all? The benefit is that AI can generate a useful starting point much faster than you could create one from scratch. But a starting point isn't a finished product. It's raw material that requires professional judgment to refine, validate, and integrate into your actual work context. Professionals who understand this distinction get enormous value from AI while avoiding the mistakes that damage reputations and derail careers. They use AI to accelerate their work, not to bypass the parts of work that require human judgment. And they sleep better at night because they know that everything with their name on it has been validated by someone who's accountable, themselves. We've spent this video exploring how professionals think about AI differently than most people. We've covered why tools matter less than cognitive frameworks, why problem definition precedes tool use, why AI should amplify thinking rather than replace it, and why verification and responsibility are non-negotiable. Now we need to connect these principles to the question that matters most. Why does this approach future-proof your career? The answer starts with understanding what's actually valuable in labor markets. For most of the 20th century, professional value came largely from specialized knowledge. If you knew things that other people didn't know, specific technical skills, domain expertise, institutional knowledge, you were valuable. The information age disrupted this model. As knowledge became accessible through search engines and online resources, simply knowing things became less valuable. What became more valuable was the ability to apply knowledge, to synthesize information, make judgments, and solve novel problems. AI is accelerating this transition. As AI tools become better at accessing and synthesizing information, the value of simply knowing things continues to decline. But here's what's not declining in value: the ability to define what problem needs to be solved. The judgment to evaluate whether a solution is good. The contextual understanding to recognize what will actually work in a specific situation. The responsibility to verify that output is correct. The wisdom to know when to use automation and when not to. These capabilities can't be automated by AI because they're fundamentally about control, judgment, and context. AI doesn't control what problems get solved. Humans do. AI doesn't have judgment about what constitutes a good outcome in a specific organizational context. Humans do. AI doesn't bear responsibility for results. Humans do. This is why the mindset we've been exploring throughout this video is so important for career stability. When you focus on tools, on being good at specific AI platforms, you're investing in capabilities that will become obsolete. When you focus on thinking, on being good at problem definition, judgment, and verification, you're investing in capabilities that become more valuable as AI improves. Think about what happens in two different career trajectories. In the first trajectory, someone becomes highly skilled at using current AI tools. They can write great prompts. They know all the features. They're impressively fast at generating output. this person is valuable today. But in 3 years, when the tools have changed significantly, or when AI capabilities have improved to the point that prompt engineering is trivial, what happens to their value? They've invested in expertise that's ephemeral. In the second trajectory, someone invests in understanding how to frame problems clearly, how to specify success criteria, how to evaluate outputs critically, how to verify results rigorously, how to integrate AI-generated content with contextual knowledge. This person might be slower with current tools because they're spending time thinking rather than just generating. But in 3 years, when tools have changed, this person is more valuable than before. The thinking skills they developed transfer perfectly to new tools. The judgment they built through practice remains relevant. The professional discipline they cultivated still differentiates them from people who just know how to use tools. There's a deeper point here about professional positioning. In every industry, there's a hierarchy of roles. At the bottom are roles that involve following instructions, taking clearly defined tasks and executing them according to established procedures. These roles are already being automated rapidly. In the middle are roles that involve applying expertise, taking somewhat ambiguous problems and solving them using specialized knowledge. These roles are being augmented by AI, and some of them are being eliminated. At the top are roles that involve defining what should be done, identifying problems, setting priorities, making strategic decisions, and taking responsibility for outcomes. The mindset we've explored in this video is specifically what positions you for that top tier. When you focus on problem definition, you're doing work that AI can't do. When you use AI to amplify your thinking rather than replace it, you're building capabilities that make you more effective as AI improves, rather than less necessary. When you take responsibility for verifying and validating AI output, you're demonstrating exactly the professional discipline that organizations need as AI becomes more prevalent. This doesn't mean you should ignore AI tools or avoid learning how to use them. Basic proficiency with AI tools is increasingly expected in many professional roles. But there's a difference between basic proficiency, understanding how to interact with AI tools effectively, and deep expertise in specific platforms. The first is necessary. The second is increasingly optional and decreasingly valuable. What's not optional and what's increasingly valuable is the cognitive discipline to use any tool effectively, to slow down and define problems clearly before rushing to solutions, to think critically about outputs rather than accepting them blindly, to verify results rather than trusting tools implicitly, to maintain professional responsibility rather than hiding behind automation. These disciplines are difficult. They require more effort than just prompting an AI tool and hoping for good results. They're slower in the short term, but they're the only sustainable source of professional value in a world where AI capabilities continue to increase. There's also a question of career satisfaction here that goes beyond just employability. Professionals who maintain these disciplines tend to find their work more meaningful. They're solving real problems, not just generating content. They're exercising judgment, not just executing instructions. They're building expertise, not just consuming tools. This creates a sense of professional growth and accomplishment that's absent when you're just prompting AI and accepting whatever it produces. The professionals who will thrive over the next decade aren't those who know the most AI tools. They're not the ones who can generate the most content or who have memorized the most prompt templates. They're the ones who understand how to think clearly about problems, how to define what success looks like, how to evaluate whether outputs are actually good, and how to take responsibility for results. These are the professionals who will keep getting promoted, who will keep finding new opportunities, who will remain valuable to organizations regardless of which AI capabilities emerge, because they're providing something that AI can't provide and that organizations will always need: judgment, context, and accountability. If this video has helped clarify how to think about AI in a way that actually strengthens your professional capabilities instead of making you dependent on tools, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We focus on frameworks that remain relevant across technological changes, the kind of thinking that compounds in value over years rather than becoming obsolete in months. The work world is changing rapidly because of AI. But the change isn't what most people think it is. The change isn't that AI will replace professionals. The change is that AI will make certain professional capabilities much more valuable. Specifically, the capabilities we've discussed in this video. The ability to define problems clearly, the discipline to verify results rigorously, the judgment to evaluate outputs critically, the wisdom to use automation appropriately rather than reflexively. These capabilities have always been valuable. What's changed is that they're now differentiating. In a world where everyone has access to powerful AI tools, the professionals who stand out aren't those who use the tools most. They're those who think most clearly. And clear thinking is something you can develop deliberately through the kind of practices we've explored. Practices that remain valuable regardless of which tools exist or which capabilities emerge next. That's the real future-proofing. Not adapting to each new tool as it appears, but developing cognitive discipline that makes you effective with any tool and valuable in any context. That's how you build a career that remains strong regardless of how technology evolves. That's how you ensure that your professional value increases rather than decreases as AI capabilities improve. And that's the mindset that separates professionals who thrive from those who struggle in the decades ahead.